really invite the speakers, Lucian, Gazmen, Marzena, and Christophe to join the podium, please.
Very good. 50% of my job is done.
Nice meeting you, Christophe.
Hi, Christophe. Nice to see you.
Hi, guys. Glad to see you.
So, all of you speak English, is that correct? Yes? Okay, we keep on English then. I knew that at some point in my career, I have to deal and wrap up so different objectives and so different spheres of politics and economy, such as Berlin process, smart growth, smart specialization, evidence-based policies. The only thing that combine all those different fields are the guests we have today. You know, that's the beauty of the European project and the beauty of the European policies, because it's one of the, if not the only place and political project in the world that we can see so many different levels of governance and initiatives and projects. It's really hard not to mention the future multi-annual financial framework, because that's the topic of the topics, if there is such a thing, especially when it comes to 1.1 trillion euros. In order to imagine how much is that, I'm not pretending to be accurate here, but it's about one quite long train full of euros. That much is it. So it covers almost all aspects of our life, starting from agriculture, infrastructure, education, smart specialization, innovation, so on and so forth. I wouldn't waste more of your time sharing my thoughts. I'm sure we have much time during the panel to debate and discuss. And only one advice to all the speakers we have. I believe one of the best skills that a politician could have is to be short, but it's about politicians. So if you feel yourself an expert, please take your time. And we are starting here with, and pay attention, I practiced this several times, Lucian Brujan. Is that correct? More or less, great. Who will give us a point of view on the building on an action plan for smart growth in the Western Balkans. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, but the sound is perfect. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you all for coming here. Also, thank you very much to DG GRC, which was the main organizer of this meeting, for organizing this before the Sofia summit on the 17th of May, which will focus on the topic of the Western Balkans, but not only on the Western Balkans. As you said, currently there is an intense discussion on the financial framework for the European Union, and certainly it's just the beginning of several discussions and fights, and we'll see what at the end will remain for science, research, innovation, and education. I hope we have at least one compromise, and this is this Erasmus Plus should be doubled. This is also a political statement. So I'm not a politician, as you said, but I will try to keep my maximum of 10 minutes because I would really like to engage in a discussion. I represent here the part connected to education, science, and innovation within the Berlin process. And the Berlin process was an initiative, which is a political initiative, started in 2014 by the Chancellor Merkel and German federal government, with great help and support from the Commission at that time. And it went on for several years. We have currently 14 countries being part of this political initiative. And the objective is quite simple: to keep the Western Balkan countries connected to Europe, to the European path, and to create a political momentum to bring up the enlargement perspective for the Western Balkan countries, and to accelerate some processes of change. Now, this is on the top political level. It's easy to communicate, but we all know it's very difficult to implement. And we have this advantage that within this initiative, we have a platform which is dedicated to matters of higher education, research, innovation, but also on the contribution of those for the societal development and economic development. And I think it's very good and it's great that we have put those topics on such a high level. Now, from 2014 until 2018 are 4 years. In political terms, this is very much, but it's a very short period. In 4 years, we have a change in momentum, in atmosphere regarding the enlargement. And all of you know that the Commission has presented in February this year its enlargement perspective, naming also a date of 2025, which from the point of view of the Commission is not a strict date, but it is at least a message towards the Western Balkan countries to accelerate their efforts to integrate into the European Union, because there are realistic chances. I would just like to mention that French President Macron had a speech in the European Parliament, because France is also very strongly supporting the Berlin process. It's France, it's UK, it's Germany, Austria, Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, plus Poland, which has joined also this effort, and the 6 Western Balkan countries. And the French President Macron said in the European Parliament, he was answering a very critical question from one MEP on treating on the Europe of 2 speeds. And he said, well, we already have in different areas several speeds, not only 1 speed. And the success of Europe has been the success of a story full of crazy risks taken by people who are in leading positions. And that's why I think that we should try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And this final panel should be about coordinating different initiatives which are going on political level, on European level, on regional, so Southeast Europe, and on national and local level. This is a challenge that cannot be solved. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we don't have the magic recipe for everything here. We don't have the magic recipe for economic development. We don't have the magic recipe for prosperity. There is no magic recipe how to create the next big disruptive innovation. There is no magic recipe how to win the next Nobel Prize. But there is enthusiasm, and there is sustained effort. There is endurance, there is a lot of patience, and there is the need to have strategic approaches. Strategic approaches means when you have so many great things going on, and I have been present in some of the sessions here, I must admit not in all of them. I was impressed, for example, what is going on in terms of science parks, in terms of incubators. What great ideas are being developed here. I have the opportunity to talk to people from Bosnia, from Ukraine, from Moldova, where we all know very well that the economical setting, the political setting, is not the easiest in the world. But still, even there, under harsh conditions, we are developing something. And I think this is the risk that should be taken. Now, what we are proposing, what we have been discussing in our meetings, is to focus on the topic of smart growth. Smart growth is a very interesting word, but it describes something that we do on a daily basis, trying to bring knowledge from evidence, from scientific discovery, from education, wisdom if you want, trying to bring in it to economic development, to prosperity of society, to change, and to reforms. So we are advocating that this is maybe one path to go, to try to agree on an agenda how to advance these topics. Because we have a special situation in the Balkans, and this makes the Balkans special. We have, on the one side, uneasy historical background, which is not cleared yet. And on the other side, we have potential. We have people who do great things, and we also have transformation of countries from the socialist system to the, let's say, capitalist or European system. And this transformation has been interrupted by conflicts. So I don't know if you know, today, 30 years ago, Josip Broz Tito, who was the leader of Yugoslavia, died. It was the death of Yugoslavia, but it was also the beginning of many, many conflicts which ended in a tragical way. We don't want to go back there. We don't need instability. We need reapproachment. We need a normal inter-societal dialogue. And we need a framework where people who have great ideas, people who have great education can thrive and can stay at home. You are from Bulgaria. I was born in Romania. Our two countries have experienced a huge emigration with the European enlargement. So for some of us it was good, but for others it was bad. And for the countries it's not so good currently. But we also see people coming back. So nothing is stable. And I think that between all those levels, when we talk about innovation, we also have the global level. And the global level is based on competitivity and competition. And this competition is without any mercy. There is no patent on ideas. There is a patent on products. When we try to compare Europe with United Nations, sorry, not you that, we can compare it with United Nations, but with the United States and what is happening there. Somebody said today, that's not happening everywhere in the United States, and this is also not going to happen everywhere in Europe, and not everywhere in Southeast Europe. So this approach to try to give a little bit to somebody, to all of the parts, is maybe not the best one. Try to focus on flagship initiatives. Try to focus on long-term investments. In the Berlin process, we talk a lot about connectivity, which means investment in roads, infrastructure, energy. Chancellor Merkel said, well, investing in a road and investing in a school and in education is similar, because at least from German point of view, a road should be good about 100 years. And if you invest a lot in a good road, in a good connectivity, you should do the same investing in people. It's a long-term process. Everybody here, and I know a lot of colleagues from the Western Balkans, are now under a little bit of pressure. There is a competition who pays more attention to the Western Balkans. But we have the same people in the Western Balkans, we have the same countries, so we have to work with them together. Yesterday, the colleague from the Science Park Ljubljana said to me, nobody wanted to talk about politics, but it is impossible to have a successful science park if you don't cooperate with local politicians, if you don't cooperate with national ones, if you don't cooperate with European Union. You cannot externalize yourself. So you have to be part of the environment. And the environment is very important, because if you create a framework which is suitable for knowledge-based development, where education, dual education, university, research, innovation, startups, business, everything is connected to each other. That's the way to go. This is a long-term strategic effort which will need a lot of years and a lot of patience. We cannot do things in our areas of action from today till tomorrow. The ones who have such successes are the people who are working with Google X or who are on a global level. We are beyond our reach, but those are the few. This is the competition. And my last say in terms of aligning different initiatives. We have many things already going on in the Western Balkans. Within the Berlin process, we have some recommendations, some actions. We have a regional economic area which should be implemented between the Western Balkan countries. We have facilities who, for the first time, connect different donors. And believe me, this is as complicated as it gets when you try to connect European banks, financial institutions, World Bank, European Commission, and try to develop the joint programming. But you need patience, you need effort, you need political support. We also have many different initiatives in the countries, and I also see some kind of a regional atmosphere, of a regional dynamic, where, for example, small countries like Slovenia play some kind of a crucial role because they say, okay, we can attract, we can be a hub, yes? Where you have cities like Belgrade, for example, which are already a hub, have always been a hub, even in the former Yugoslavia. You have other cities here who are developing in terms of IT, who are connected to international hubs. So I think we need to, in terms of alignment, and this is a discussion with Giancarlo Caratis here. He was one of my first people in the Commission, and I always admired him for his foresight. We had those discussions 4 years ago. It is very difficult to align things which are going on parallel. But this is maybe the crucial thing. Let's sit together, let's work, let's discuss. We don't need to create another committee. We don't need to create another working group, another secretariat, another I don't know what. We just need to sit together and to see, okay, let's find a consensus on some major topics. Because we have 8 years until 2025, where we need to push, radically push this region on the European path. And at the same time, we need to consider what's happening in the world. We need to consider things like what's happening in Paris with Station F, one of the biggest incubator hubs, who is now, hopefully, I hope for the French friends, that it's going to be the next Silicon Valley of Europe. We need to consider artificial intelligence, things which are developing. No? We need to consider digital future. And we should not stick to maybe some old approaches of building a better thing which already exists somewhere else. But try to build something new. This is the consensus. And maybe I'm biased because I come from a German system where consensus is our daily work. We cannot take any kind of decision without consulting the 16 Länder, the 16 countries compositing the German federal state. And it takes a hell of a lot of endurance to find consensus. But consensus means that we agree on a certain amount of things. And for the rest, in terms of alignment, let people do what they do best and talk to the people who are practitioners. We have so many practitioners here, but we heard so few practical examples. We had many studies, many analyses. It's very great in terms of finding a solution, taking a decision. But we have people here who are practitioners who work in those environments on a daily basis and find solutions with the environments they work in. So this is for me alignment. And I don't know if I can give you, let's say, a complete success story how to put all the puzzles together. We will never make this. But I think we have a certain time pressure for the next 8 years for the region of Southeast Europe. Something has to happen if we want to have a cohesive, joint European Union. Thank you.
Well done. You know what, Jan? We in the Balkans, because you said you're born in Romania, isn't it?
Yes, the western part.
Western part, okay, I get it. I get the message. Good, but still in the Balkans, we like to say that our neighbor is more than your brother. This is how we treat each other, at least most of the time. So I believe if we get together the passion we share here in that geographical region and use it for something positive, I'm sure in not that long time we could be an example of how multilingual, multicultural environment could be positive to actually make the people's lives better. And thank you very much for your speech, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. We will stick now with smart growth with Gazmen Turdiu, who is the Deputy Secretary General, Regional Cooperation Council. And I'm sure you prepared a good presentation, so I can't wait to see it. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting RCC to participate actively to the discussion here and to bring our experience from our point of view. I think I would need this device to change the slides. Somewhere. Okay. Well, I'm happy to bring here the perspective from the region. We mostly heard today perspective from the national standpoint, but I will bring here the perspective of my own organization in charge of coordinating what is happening at the regional level, specifically in the Western Balkans. And well, you made my entry easier by mentioning the Berlin process, because I'm going to get focused on the outcome of the Trieste Summit, which is a very important event in this chain of Western Balkan 6 summits that started in Berlin. And thank you very much to Germany and to Chancellor Merkel for taking this initiative, as I'm thanking all those that contributed in terms of member states, but the European Union and the European Commission to set up a consolidated process that hopefully will bring positive results for the region. So what I'm going to discuss today here, there are two main topics. First is what are the outcomes of the Trieste Summit last summer, which are relevant to research innovation, which is the subject of this conference. The second, I would like to discuss with you what awaits us to ensure full implementation of the multi-annual action plan for establishment of the regional economic area. We don't want those that we prepare in paper to remain just nice papers on the shelves, but we want them to bring to reality. Well, it was mentioned during the morning session that and it was repeated even during this the breakout session before this plenary one, that this is not a story that begins now. I mean, in terms of getting focused in the Western Balkans and the Southeast Europe in research and development. It's a story that's started to happen long ago. And actually, in a structured way, at regional level, it started to happen with the Southeast Europe 2020 strategy, approved in 2013. And this strategy has 5 pillars. And one of the pillars is the smart growth pillar with 4 dimensions, which are education and competencies, R&D and innovation, digital society, and the last one, cultural and creative sectors. Well, the aim of this pillar of this strategy was to promote innovation and to make our region more competitive in terms of added value, to move away from a situation when we were competing with low wages of the human labor. We want to bring our region to the level that we compete with added value and hopefully with the newest technologies. Over these years, implementing the strategy, but specifically the smart growth pillar, we have seen mixed results. There are 2 main indicators with which we measure progress in this pillar. One is the GDP, the increase of the GDP per person employed, and with that, unfortunately, we have seen very, very low progress, which I mean, it's a problem for the region. And the other one is the highly qualified people that the region could introduce into the workforce, and for that, the region has been extremely successful. Actually, the target that they put themselves for 2020, at the baseline was 2010, has been already achieved, which is an indication of the varied progress that we have achieved with implementing the strategy as a region. One of the main lessons learned when were making the analysis of the progress with implementation of strategy was that a key problem for the region is its fragmentation. And not only economic fragmentation, but mostly about it. And this is how we then came with a proposal then endorsed by the Prime Ministers during the Trieste Summit to establish the regional economic area. And for that, to bring it to reality, the multi-annual action plan was agreed between the 6 leaders, Prime Ministers of the Western Balkans. Actually, this is a mid-term agenda that has these components. First, to enable the flow of goods, services, capital, and highly skilled labor. And second, by implementing this multi-annual action plan, the region should address the problems that hinder most its development, which are fragmentation of the markets, the lack of sufficient investments in the economy, so to make the region even more open for foreign investments, to strengthen the research and innovation base, which is very weak in the region, and last but not least, to digitize our societies and our businesses, to make possible that the region reaps the benefits of the digital integration of the digital society. Who should work to implement the multi-annual action plan? Definitely the governments. Things should happen there on the ground, but if they would be let alone, they would not be able to succeed with it. So they would need support from EU member states. They would need the continuation of the support of the European Commission and the European Union. We're happy to hear today from Director General Danielsson that the EU is committed to continue it, even to increase its support. But in all this framework, I would like to get focused on the RCC's tasks in implementing the multi-annual action plan for the regional economic area. Well, RCC first is tasked to deal with all the horizontal processes, starting with programming, monitoring, and coordination. And second, RCC will be in charge will be in charge of contributing to the implementation of 3 out of 4 components of the multi-annual action plan, which is investment, mobility, and the digital. What are the challenges that the Western Balkans 6 are facing in the area of research and development? So let's get focused on what is the main subject of this conference. Over the years, and it was mentioned even before, there is a persistently low level of investment in research and development in the Western Balkans. It's less than 1%. The previous speaker in the previous session mentioned even 0.5%. I'm not able to tell about figures, but it's definitely less than 1% of GDP for over 2 decades, which has had profound negative effects on the impact and on the quality of the public research production. It has impacted negatively the integration of the academic and of the research networks into the European and to the global ones. And it has hindered the innovation potential of research in the region. What were the consequences of this situation? Were that the region ranks very low in all the indicators related to the international database on research impact, and we have seen only sporadic success rates in Horizon 2020. And the second one is that the research commercialization is at a very, very early stage. According to the Balkan Barometer, which is the public opinion survey and the business opinion survey that we publish every year, 17% of the businesses, only 17% of the businesses report development of new products in cooperation or using the services of research institutions. And this is remarkably low as compared with the European Union. What are the actions outlined in the multi-annual action plan for establishing a regional economic area? Well, I would like to mention again, to repeat what I said, that this is not something which starts now. The whole multi-annual action plan builds on the smart growth pillar of the Southeast Europe 2020 strategy. So by gathering experience during the implementation of of the strategy, and particularly the smart growth pillar, we were able to come up with a proposal, detailed proposal on an executable action plan to be implemented by all of us in the next years. And actually the MAPREA is designed to address exactly the issues that are mostly hindering, having a negative impact and preventing the region from developing as everybody wants, like which are smart growth policies, research and innovation, the S3, as we call it, the acronym of the cooperation with the economy of research institutes and research circles. Second, mobility and cooperation of researchers, basically talking about human connectivity in this respect, both within the Western Balkans and between the Western Balkans and the EU. The third is trying to improve the research infrastructure and establishment of centers of excellence. And the last one is the digital innovation. And I would like to mention here the Skopje Summit, which took place on the 18th and 19th of April. That was a remarkable event in which the governments of the region, the civil society, but most importantly, the private businesses discussed together what they should focus on in the coming years in order to overpass this huge gap between our region and the EU in terms of digital integration. The MAP's added value is because it is the fact that it represents a really comprehensive agenda on research and development. And if implemented in full, then it would enable the Western Balkan Six to transform their economies from the model of their economies from the ones that can compete, that they have now, to those that can compete and to integrate successfully in the EU innovation-driven economies. And second, the Multi-Annual Action Plan provides a great opportunity to position smart growth as the cornerstone for the competitiveness and economic development of the 6 economies of the Western Balkans, but even as a region as a whole. What has to be done? Well, first we have tried to identify those shared needs between the Western Balkan 6 economies in terms of research and development. And we have all agreed that investment in the research infrastructure and people, skills and people in the region is an area in which all the Western Balkan governments, but even those supporting, including the European Commission, should get focused on. And second is the need to build capacities and open opportunities for particularly the young researchers to participate in the existing EU programs, because that would even increase their personal skills, but would help even to exchange experience between the region and the EU. Regionally, this is very important as there are so many initiatives and the area is so very crowded. We need to bring all together the initiatives, but by trying to use the synergies of what is already existing there, we need to avoid overlapping, so that is clearly happening quite often. The role of RCC in all this is that through our already established working groups, we will ensure coordination and cooperation among the governments in the region, other stakeholders, regional cooperation mechanisms, EU member states and the European Commission. But on the other hand, the governments of the region should clearly prioritize among the different initiatives that are around. There is a need for prioritization because even the resources for implementation are limited. So that means that in order to achieve better results, we have to get focused first on what are the quick gains, and then in parallel to work with those processes which will guarantee long-term but more stable gains in the future. And as competition will always be there, it is very important that the governments and all the stakeholders here understand and agree that a healthy cooperation is much better than an unhealthy competition. So that is this is another challenge that we all together will have to face. what RCC will be doing is that we will continue to cooperate with all the stakeholders alike, everybody which is involved in this very complex process, with the region governments, with DG Research and Development, with DG JRC, and all others. I mentioned slightly at the beginning that we don't want our plans to remain a nicely printed paper in the shelves, but we want to measure results, and the results and success started to happen. I would just wanted to get focused on one of the success stories, which for us is very important. It's the story of the success of cooperation of RCC with DG R&D on open science. Because for the first time ever, the new EU report on open science will include the chapter on the Western Balkans. So Western Balkans is not left aside, but it's looked broadly in the prospect of the whole continent of the European Union. And that is clearly a result of the great cooperation that we have established with DG R&D, and I'm grateful, very grateful to all people that were engaged in that. And indeed, for the future, we look forward to improving and further building on the existing cooperation with this Director General under the Smart Specialization and the Technology Transfer Project. And with this, I'm concluding my remarks, but I stand ready for any questions that the audience might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Listening to you about the innovations and in the context of our region here, I was thinking that just 20 years ago or 25 years ago, in order to make a country more influential, more powerful, you have to buy guns and tanks and planes and stuff like that. This is how you gain respect and influence among your neighbors and your partners, if you like. But I think the times has changed. Now if you want to make your country more influential, more powerful in the world, you have to invest in research and development. If you create and invent a new product, new chemical element, if you like, this is how you're gonna be more influential. This is the way how your nation will be richer and your people will live better. At least in my point of view. And this is probably the good part. Now we propose increasing of Horizon 2020 budget with 50%, over 100 billion for that. But if we don't change the way we distribute those funds, it will be no further development in effectiveness and the goal reached. But it's a long topic, and I'm sure we'll go back to it. And I'm especially interested in the next speaker. And here, the task of pronouncing names, it goes even tougher for me. Pay attention. So I'll tell you why I'm interested. Your reports, I mean, not your precisely, but OECD reports are quite influential among the members of the European Parliament. Probably it's not good to mention it, but we pay attention what you're writing, what you're typing and printing. So sometimes we take it into consideration, and you can see that we based our opinion sometimes on your conclusions as well. So ladies and gentlemen, Marzena Kisilewska. Perfect? Great. The floor is yours.
It works? Oh, it works. Super. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for staying with us to the very end of this very interesting conference. Of course, it's a bit challenging to speak as a penultimate speaker after the 2 days of inspiring debates, but nevertheless, I hope that you will hear something that you haven't heard before. I have the pleasure to be the head of division for Southeast Europe in OECD. My division is coordinating the so-called regional program for Southeast Europe. Basically, we work with 6 Western Balkan countries, but we also work with Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia, who aspire for the membership of the OECD. But this is sort of a bit different kind of cooperation. I was following very closely the discussions we had about different aspects of innovation, digitalization, artificial intelligence, all kinds of means to achieve the goals, all kinds of levels to make the decisions. But I have the feeling that everything what we will be discussing during this conference is to how to achieve the ultimate objectives, which is economic development, growth, competitiveness. Be it EU member states, being in the countries we work with, in the countries that are neighboring with European Union, they're aspiring for the membership. Of course, I mean, I will focus on Western Balkans now because these are the countries the closest to our heart and closest to our work, where the challenges are very well known. We have the access to finance that has to be addressed. We have regulatory frameworks that are not perfect and ever changing. We have unemployment, but then we have lack of labor for the skilled jobs, brain drain, all kinds of these things were already discussed. But as the challenges are more or less evenly spread around the regions, the assets aren't. And this is where I think the smart specialization is absolutely the idea that should be followed. It is the idea how to best use the very limited resources we have, being financial resources, being administrative resources, human resources, you name it. And how to go smart about it. First answer, I think, is natural, and I mean, very much concur with Gazmend, who was speaking behind me, and we are working together all the time, is regional cooperation. Not to go too far to it, I would just like to refer to the panel we had in the morning. And for me, each and every presentation there called for regional cooperation. All these problems with the small scale, with the small financing, and so on and so forth, call for coordination, for opening the communication channels. And I would really very much like to encourage colleagues from the region to cooperate on that. This is a fantastic opportunity at the moment. Each of you is on a very preliminary or very beginner stage of programming your strategies, programming your smart specialization actions. Cooperate with you with each other voluntarily, spontaneously, not because a donor put conditionality on you or the international organizations put you under pressure, for your own best interest. What is redundant in your economy may be indispensable in the economy of your neighbors. You have a lot of assets. You don't have all of them, but if you share them, I think that you will succeed with all the plans you have. The other thing to address the challenges is, of course, well-designed and efficient policies. To get to this stage, we, of course, need information, we need evidence, we need well-informed decisions and implementation. And this is where, I mean, I would humbly say our organization has some field to intervene and to help our partners. And as I mentioned, our program, we do lots of things, but for the sake of this conference, I would like to mention 3 features. We have 2 huge assessment. One is called Competitiveness Outlook. The second is called SME Policy Index. And on the top of it, we support the design of economic reform programs. All these 3 features fit into each other. They somehow create one entity of, let's say, intellectual support for the reforms in the region. How to approach the reforms? We were talking throughout this conference about education, about innovation, about digitalization, about all kinds of other things, and they are super important. But to succeed in the reforms, to succeed in each and every of these sectors. And in overall economic development, we need holistic support. Unfortunately, this is very, very heavy. This is the last edition of Competitiveness Outlook for Southeast Europe. It was released last week. And I mean, it's not very visible, but I would like you to look at the logo. The logo is an arch of stones. And it represents, of course, the ultimate complexity, but at the same time, perfect interdependence. You cannot just take any of these stones, because otherwise the whole construction will fall. It also can represent the bridge, and we need so many bridges in our region. So this is the symbol of approach in which you cannot just focus on one policy. In order to succeed, you have to get the policies right, at least to some extent, each and every one of them. Competitiveness Outlook is the biggest assessment that OECD does. Of course, we, as our moderator, Andrei, already mentions, OECD produces tens of publications. This is what we do. But why this publication is so specific? Why it's special? Why it's innovative? Because it's, first of all, very horizontal. It covers 6 countries of Western Balkans, and it translates the OECD instrument in the tailor-made way. It translates the instruments in the way the Western Balkan countries can implement them. OECD standards are not easy to implement. These are the standards that were created through the peer pressure, peer learning, best practices of the most developed countries. We don't want to wait for Western Balkan economies to reach those standards. We want them to step by step adhere to them every year with every move they make. To create this framework, we translated these instruments in more than 600 indicators, so you can imagine how much information there is. We have quantitative indicators that tell us of the quality, qualitative indicators, the quality of the policies implemented, supported by the qualitative indicators which bring us the additional information, additional arguments in our assessment. But this is only the peak of the iceberg, because what is most important about this whole exercise is the process. It's how we bring our policymakers we work, our colleagues from the partner administration, to understand and to internalize the findings and the recommendations we have. We decided to bring them very much into the driving seat, and throughout the process we somehow tried to retrieve the evidence that's already and the knowledge that already exists in the governments. The policymakers were supposed to answer huge amount of questions in the questionnaires, and we stressed the importance of this exercise for them. They were supposed to figure out themselves where they are in the policies, what is missing, where would you like to be in the future, what is the timeline of these achievements that they are planning. After this strategic planning exercise and problem identification exercise, we organized more than 100 roundtables in all the countries to discuss the policies, to challenge the policymakers with the help of the colleagues from all over OECD, but with the assumptions that there are not bad policies per se, that the policies that were designed serve the objectives of the countries. But the policymakers were supposed to, were challenged and questions, and were supposed to defend them. In order to make sure that all the decisions they make, good or wrong, are made in full awareness of the consequences. So in the end of the day, we came up with recommendations that I can absolutely confidently say are owned by our partners in the region. It's an enormous success. It's a one big success story. Can you imagine that 500 people were involved in this exercise only in the administration of the Western Balkans, not to mention like tens of other stakeholders. It's an enormous success of the administration and policy making and policy design in Western Balkans. This is huge publication. It's full of information, full of recommendations. Hopefully they will be implemented and translated into the policies. But they show how enormous potential these countries represent. Not only by showing what progress they made, what they have to do, and how much they do, but the potential of creating new policies, creating the reality around them, creating the economy. So this potential we have to build on and unleash somehow. And this is also the potential we were talking about, the innovation, about creativity. There is a lot of it. We just have to reach out and take it from them and use it, of course. I mentioned also economic reform programs because, I mean, based on this huge amount of knowledge and huge amount of evidence, I mean, if the findings and the recommendations follow, I think that there will be very well-informed decision made. This economic reform programs exercise, which, as you know, all the member states do it as well. Every year, there is a set of programs, individual programs presented to the European Commission. And economic reform programs are reality checks for these kind of exercises. Because by looking at the priorities, the countries, the priority reforms, priority measures that countries chosen, we really see what really made it from this assessment to the really policy-making exercise. We, of course, help countries to prioritize, to diagnose the problems, and to then monitor implementations. But then the most important thing is, again, awareness of what the countries need. What is the priority, what has to be implemented first, and what follows suit. Reflection after several, I mean, our program has been present in the countries like Western Balkans and the neighbor countries for 200 years. I've been working on this for 4 years. The reflection is that there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of awareness, unfortunately not too much implementations. There are areas that, I mean, the needs, the priorities are very well defined. Our partners know what to do, they know how to approach things, but they know how to follow what to do to make it efficient. They make several attempts, but they didn't quite work. What we propose, and this is a new feature also of regional dimension, is so-called regional policy dialogue. We picked up several areas that nothing has been moving for years, and bring around the table people from Western Balkans, both from government, private sector, academia, and their partners from OECD and EU member states. And in very open, of course organized, but open and very honest dialogue, they share the experience, they share what they, de facto from the sides of the most developed countries, for instance, when we had technology transfer of FDA, SME linkages, or green innovation. The stories from the most developed countries, for instance, like Korea, Israel, is the story of failures first. We were talking about failures and tried to make mistakes yesterday a lot. This is exactly how you learn, and our partners found it the most valuable part of this dialogue is not the ready-made recipe for success. It's exactly the very strenuous way to succeed, to try to make one step back, one step forward, 2 steps back. And this proved, I mean, as enormous success because we're supposed to share success stories. So I have already 2. One is the whole process of competitiveness outlook and the huge inclusivity and ownership of that. But the second is this very practical tool of sharing the experience. Every time we invite a government representative who presents the successful policy, we also invite an entrepreneur, a civil society representative to give somehow to support this with his own story of success based on those policies. I would like to finish by encouraging, we also look for synergies, encouraging all our partners to use the tools we prepared, use Competitiveness Outlook. It's enormous amount of information. It can serve policy planning and design. It can serve financial allocation. It can serve like academic research. It will spare you a lot of time and money. It's there for you. We, together with partner governments, did this enormous job to serve you. So please, for the sake of synergies, best smart use of resources, use it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Always punctual, and it's good that we can rely on your expertise and hard work to base our policies on scientific evidence. So I'm sure there will be a lot of interest from the audience to your presentation. Mentioning the audience, I know that we are what separates you from the afternoon walk in a sunny Sofia, but I can assure you that even more interesting introduction are coming. So if you invest next 15 minutes here, I'm sure we do our best to pay it back to you. And we are coming to our last speaker, again talking about smart specialization. It's Christophe Yvetot from United Nations Industrial Development Organization. So your presentation is already up to our screens, and the floor is yours, Christophe.
Thank you very much. So since I'm the last speaker, my role is even more difficult than yours, and I hope you don't expect me to make a synthesis of the rich discussion that we had in the last 2 days. I will focus mainly my intervention on explaining why smart specialization is so important, particularly for the Western Balkans, but for the European Union and maybe beyond. Also to make a connection between smart specialization and the circular economy, and then to maybe discuss what we could do together. So I'm Christophe Yvetot. I'm the head of UNIDO Brussels office. My role is to strengthen the cooperation with the European Union. We work in more than 100 countries around the world in different ways, and it's not a bilateral relation, it's more a trilateral or more relation, because most of what we do together is to support countries around the world. So UNIDO is the UN agency that deals with industrial cooperation worldwide, and we have 170 member states, including European member states, but also the Western Balkan member states. You are all our member states, and together we've been pushing in the last few years for making the industrial development inclusive and sustainable. So inclusive means that we want that the industrial sector create better jobs, qualified jobs, massive number of jobs, and this is what we're talking about here with smart specialization. Also, to make the industry more sustainable, we believe that the future of industry is to be green and clean, and that with this direction, industry will meet also the aspiration of the people. Why is that so important to discuss smart specialization? Is, as you know, as I just said, we're promoting inclusive and sustainable industry, and it's a fact that in 2015, all the world leaders have approved what we call the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with 17 goals. One of them is the Sustainable Development Goal number 9, which brings together infrastructure, industry, and innovation. This is exactly what we're talking about here. And through this goal, world leaders encourage all countries, whether they are least developed countries, industrialized or middle-income countries, to support their industrial sector and to foster innovation. Why is it so important to foster the industrial sector, the manufacturing sector? Because through history, through facts, we see that those countries which have a strong industry are better off. They have more jobs, more qualified jobs. They have also more high-level services, high-tech services. And if you just look at the European Union and the statistics that DG GROW has released, is that we know that one job in industry creates 2 or 3 jobs in services, for example. But depending on the sector and the country, it can be even much more than that. That's why we very much support our member state to have a strong policies and invest in their industrial sector. In the last 2 days, when I was listening to each speaker, I don't think that I have found one speaker not talking about industry. It was all about, those 2 days were really about industry. And that's why smart specialization is very important. Of course, there are discussions, you know, I would say intellectual and theoretical discussion on how you compare smart specialization with industrial policies, whatever. Some say that it's a part of industrial innovation policies. Whatever you call it, I think for us, at least in UNIDO, it's a very important experience, an experiment, because first it's large scale. I read in some documents that it involves 170 regions, 18 countries, and also involved a massive investment of, I think, 120 billion. I hope somebody will not correct me. I read that in documents. But I think it's a major experiment. And we see major experiments in Asia, in Latin America, even in Africa. But this experiment that is being done here is quite, I think, a massive experiment. So we are looking, like you, we are very happy also maybe to contribute. We can also discuss how to measure performance. We have our own instruments. For example, I will show you this in my next slide. So can you? I don't know where I should point, but we have a so it's technology, you see. It's so we have an industrial. Can you see, ask the colleague? Maybe he can, if he can help. He succeeded. Okay, thank you very much. So we have an industrial. Thank you very much. So we have released our industrial development report in 2018, and we can see already the performance, the industrial performance of the various countries of the region, and some are, I would say, not in a good, not performing, like Albania, but you have some countries like Serbia, Macedonia, and others. I even include also Bulgaria, since we're in Bulgaria, and I think it will be interesting through the time. We don't expect anyway, you know, huge movements because it's on a medium-term perspective, but I think it's very important what we measure with our measuring the industrial competitiveness is first the capacity to produce and export manufactured goods. So that's also to see what you export is very important. Then the technology deepening and upgrading. What is the intake of innovation? What is the intake of technology in the private sector, particularly? And then the third measurement is the world impact. How do you measure compared to the rest of the world? I think it's very important, this also last dimension, because although I think 70 to 80% of the trade is within Europe, of the Balkans and the European Union. However, everybody now knows and expects that 80% of the growth will be outside Europe. So I think thinking of smart specialization, not only to look inward, but also have a look of what's happening in the world is also very important. And for this, we can also maybe support and work in cooperation with the region to have this in mind. also, if what we will see as a successful experience can be also shared with other countries around the world. I think many countries are now looking at this experience, and if we can help sharing this experience, it will be most welcome. My second point is on I'm not that fluent in this system. Thank you very much. My second point is about smart specialization and the circular economy. I think it's very important. I know that already some countries have included this, but I think we see in the region an important need to improve the performance, environmental performance, and also to make of this, would say, a new objective of the European Union, that anyway those countries who would like to exceed, they will anyway have to comply with, and to move towards this new ways of doing the economy, is to improve their environmental performance through resource efficiency, cleaner production, and how to avoid the waste. And all of this also contributes to the competitiveness. If you pay less electricity because you have more energy efficiency, or if you waste less material, I think you will go becoming more competitive. Next slide. So for this, we have beyond, doing studies, etc. We're also providing to our member countries technical assistance, technical cooperation, and we have a very strong, I would say, cooperation with the region in terms of the creation of resource efficient and cleaner production centers. So each country of the region has a cleaner production center. This is a center that helps the government to change the policy towards the circular economy, work with the mezzo-level industry association, and also bring knowledge and capacity at company level to improve their processes and their environmental performance. You can see the list here of those countries where we have a center. And next, thank you very much. And then the idea is to move and support the eco-innovation agenda. So this is also very linked to smart specialization. You can work on circular economy at the level of company, but of course, as we've discussed, there were several panels these days about industrial parks, or I would say technological parks. And I think we should also try to make the link, because if we look at Bulgaria, for example, we have made an agreement recently with the entity that manages the industrial parks. And there are almost 10 industrial parks, but in all the country there are old industrial parks or new industrial parks, and there should be a connection between those technological parks and the industrial parks, because otherwise you have on one side parks doing very good technology and research, and another park where you do the dirty activities. But I think there should be a link, so that what is being done in those technological parks also is connected with those industrial parks. So for this, next slide, we have made a big study and more than 30 industrial parks in 12 countries. And we have just released a new report on eco-industrial parks together with the World Bank and together with GIZ of Germany. And there you have all recommendations and how to do eco-industrial parks. I mean, you can do industrial parks, but maybe you can also manage to make them according to the circular economy concept. I will finalize now my presentation to what we could do together. And in a general way, of course, we're ready to support and discuss with all our member states from Western Balkan and with the EU on the smart specialization and the particular exchange of ideas and data that we can have. But also, as I said, try to see together how we could link this science park and eco-industrial parks to make sure that we can, through this, foster environmental innovation, but also competitiveness of local industries. We are already managing some projects with DG NEAR in the neighborhood, Eastern Europe, and the Mediterranean. The cases that we have are amazing. Most companies, they can have a return on investment through resource efficiency and cleaner production within 6 months or 1 year. So we're discussing in many panels about what is the motivation for the private sector to use innovation. Yeah, it's a business. If they see that in half a year or in 1 year they have a return on investment, they will invest. And most of the cases we have 1 on 10 of return on investment. For 1 we invest, we have investment by the private sector by 10. So we would be, of course, ready to improve cooperation in this regard. We see with the network we have established in the region that we could have really very successful regional cooperation. And we could think about, for example, a switch Balkan, there's a switch Med, a switch Asia. There could be a switch Balkan that would support this specific part of the smart specialization and help country make their industries more competitive. I will stop here. Thank you very much again to the Bulgaria presidency for the joint work we have done, but also I would like to special thank to the Joint Research Center. We have worked together already more than 1 year. We were together in Belgrade last year, in Thessaloniki, and I'm very happy to be here to conclude this cycle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your interesting presentation. And now we are in Q&A session. Any questions? Well, I know the easiest way to get out of this situation is to say, well, probably the presentations were so good that there is no questions left. But I wouldn't mention it. So, is it anything that you catch your attention of what you heard now? Or the session was long and tough enough and you need some time to process the food of thought that our wonderful speakers today shared with us? Very good. If not, then I would like to conclude and thank the Joint Research Center for that opportunity. It is a pleasure for me being here. And since we're sharing, you know, with our last updates with the agenda and what's being achieved, I would like to share with you that in 9 minutes I have to be live on television. So if somehow someone get a flying carpet, then I have to leave immediately. And once again, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure for me. Bye-bye.
So I can imagine that our speakers will not mind if we have the closing remarks.